good evening.
How's it going?
We hope you're all well. All right, we're all back, and this is our third lesson today, so we hope the first two lessons went well for you. Now, today what we're going to do is the purpose of creation. Obviously, the purpose of creation is very important for us, otherwise we don't know what we're doing here. And then life goes by in the blink of an eye, and next thing you know, it's all over. So it's very important for every human being, everyone actually in the world, to really know what the purpose of creation is, so that we can actually envision for ourselves a future which is parallel to that. Otherwise, we have no aim, no shamim. Okay, let's just bear with me. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, great. So we had a bit of a technical glitch. Let me just take that all over again. Let me just recap. Okay, this is our third lesson. So welcome to our third lesson. This third lesson is going to be about the purpose of creation. And the purpose of creation is something very obviously important for all of us. Because if we know the purpose of life, we can actually envision a future for ourselves which is parallel to that purpose. And the more parallel and the more integrated we are to the actual purpose of creation, then our lives can have a bit more meaning. It can be more focused, it can be directed properly. And actually, because we know what we're striving to reach, we wouldn't have so much suffering, because even though we haven't attained the purpose yet, just to be able to know that and to understand what the purpose is already gives us a good focal point. It's a good compass for us to head to. And in fact, all our problems, many of the problems we have in life, the mother of all questions is why me, is simply because we don't know the purpose of life. And all our suffering is because this is unknown. It's an unknown criteria in our lives, and it's just giving us grief. So we run after all kinds of transient pleasures. Just like in the first lesson we learned, the pleasure and the desire, they cancel each other out. So no matter what pleasure you run after, as soon as you get that pleasure, as soon as you fulfill your desire, the taste, the pleasure, it all disappears. And then we're left with a minus, because we've spent time, money, effort, stress trying to get something, which at the end of the day left us, pretty much unfulfilled again. So being in that loop, having running around like a dog chasing its own tails with all these transient, fading, fleeting desires, it's obviously the most important information to know: the purpose of creation, who created us, why we were created, what are we supposed to do here anyway, and once we do that, what should we be getting to? So all those questions are going to be answered in this lesson, but let's have a 1-minute recap, okay, about the previous two lessons. Now, in our first lesson, we talked about what is Kabbalah, and we said Kabbalah is the way, it's a method, a practical method to attain the thought of creation. What does that mean? It means to know, understand, feel everything that happens to us and in the universe. Now, that lesson would have already given us a tip about what the purpose of creation is. So that's what we want to get to. So in life, throughout history, what happened to humanity was, throughout the years, we had a growing egoism, a great desire to receive growing, and we as humanity started to go through these cycles of development until we got to the 21st century. Let's say this is the 21st century. And we developed through various cycles of desires. And in the 21st century, what you guys have, what we have, what any student of, a serious student of Kabbalah has, is something called a point in the heart. It's a desire inside of us that wants to find out the meaning of our lives. And that's called a dot in the heart. It's very important, because without this specific point, this question about the meaning of life, this inner urge to find out why we're living, is stemming from this dot in the heart. It's still inside our desire to receive, which, as you know from the first lesson, is the whole of creation. We're just a desire to receive. We're a desiring machine. But this specific desire is related to something which is beyond our world. It's asking about the reason of creation, the purpose of creation. And throughout the generations as humanity developed, we had greater and greater desire to receive. We had desires in the still level, which is food, sex, family. We had desires in the vegetative level, which is money, the desire to get rich. We had desires of the animate level, which was honor and control. This is like politicians. And then we had the human level of desire to develop, and that was science, because we wanted to know. And beyond that now, as you know, probably know if you're reading science, science is pretty much stuck now. Quantum physics is now more of a theoretical physics. It's not really concrete, substantial physics. So science has come to a point where they can't move further, and it becomes something blurred between substance and non-substance, something very blurry. Now, at this point of human development, which is the beginning of the 21st century, we thus henceforth have come to be asking about the meaning of life. And that is, in fact, the real human level. Let's call it spiritual for the sake of argument. Okay, let's call this the level spiritual, our next state. This is the next state where humanity needs to get to. And in order for us to understand our lives here, in our corporeal reality, we need to actually go one level higher. As you might recall, I did that pyramid in the previous lessons. I said, in order for us to understand ourselves, we need to go up one level, which is a higher level of consciousness. Humanity is at the top of the pyramid, and below us there's the animate, vegetative, and the still levels. So we can understand those levels. For example, the animate is the body. It's the biological matter that we're in. And the vegetative level, we can also understand that through the science of botany. And the still level, we can understand through physics and chemistry, astronomy, and so on. So all these sciences that we have are fair enough. They're good for us to understand what's going on in this world. But because we haven't escalated ourselves to one level higher, we can't really understand what's going on with us. Therefore, the understanding of what we do, why we do, and how we do things, although it is researched in psychology, psychology is also not something concrete, because you can't have a science which is fixed for the whole of humanity. Why? Because we're all different. So psychology doesn't work either. It can't work because all of us are different, and all of us see the world and perceive the world in our own unique way. So we need to attain this higher level of existence, and that higher level of existence, understanding the whole of creation, the thought behind creation, understanding the thought of the Creator, why He did everything, why He's doing everything, and why He's going to do everything in the future. All of these things we need to understand, and we need to understand His level. Now we're going to read a little bit, and we're going to read from Kabbalah for the Student. Okay, this book you guys already know. And let's see what we're going to read. We're going to read from page 112. And let me get my glasses out. And we're going to read an article called Introduction to the Book of Zohar. And it's item 6. Let's see how we go. Rightio then. Page 112, Kabbalah for the Student, article Introduction to the Book of Zohar. Item 6. Now, as usual, please ask your questions from the chat box, and we'll try to nail them as best we can. Our sages have already said that the Creator created the world for no other reason but to delight His creatures. So the purpose of creation is for the Creator to delight us. That's good to know. And here's where we must place our minds and all our thoughts, for it is the ultimate aim of the acts of the creation of the world. And we must bear in mind that since the thought of creation was to bestow upon his creatures, he had to create in the souls a great measure of desire to receive that which he had thought to give them. For the measure of each pleasure and delight depends on the measure of the will to receive it. The greater the will to receive, the greater the pleasure, and the lesser the will, the lesser the pleasure from reception. Thus the thought of creation itself necessarily dictates the creation of an excessive will to receive in the souls, to fit the immense pleasure that his almightiness thought to bestow upon the souls. For the great delight and the great desire to receive go hand in hand. Right, so the creator or nature or the force behind creation, doesn't matter what, wants to bestow to us a great, huge, excessive pleasure. In order to give us that, he had to create us from, well, guess what? The desire to receive. Now that we're a desire to receive, with a huge desire to receive, we need to come to that realization of developing a soul, so that in the last sentence he said, so that he could fulfill the souls. Now in this body, in this corporeal body, we don't have a soul. Okay, you might be surprised to know that we don't actually have a soul. We have to build one, and this is how we're going to do it. Okay, so the creator is, let's just recap here. The creator is a desire to bestow, just like he just said. And we are a big desire to receive. This is how it needs to be, because our relationship with the creator is a bit of give and take. So he wants to bestow. It's his nature to bestow, because his attribute is love, and the action of the attribute of love is bestowal, giving. Just like in this world, when we love somebody, we love to buy them something and give them something. We like to make them happy. So the creator wants to make us happy as well. So here is the creator. Let's call him like infinity, and this is the individual. All right, and inside here we have the dot in the heart as well. So we're a big desire to receive, and the creator wants to fulfill that. And that's the situation. So let's see how we're going to realize that. Let's carry on reading again on page 116 this time, a little forward. And we're going to read, what item is it? Item number 14. Page 116. Right. Thus we necessarily find that on the whole, there are three states to the soul. The first state is their presence in Ein Sof, in the thought of creation, where they already have the future form of the end of correction. Okay, now this is something we should sit and draw. So let's see what he's telling us here. Item 14. So the creator, the first state is their presence in Ein Sof. So the creator created us initially in perfection. That's what it means. Ein Sof means no end, and no end means absolute fulfillment. So initially when he created us, we were all full of pleasure and perfection. Let's make it all yellow, like we're fulfilled with light. Okay, that sounds good. That sounds motivating. In the thought of creation, where they already have the future form of the end of correction. So when the creator created us initially in the first place, he already determined the future for us. The creator can't make things up as he goes along, because otherwise you'd need to be tweaking with creation all the time. And if you need to tweak with something, what does that tell you? Well, it means you made something imperfect, so you keep having to change it. But the Kabbalists are saying the creator is perfect. So if he was perfect, well, if he is perfect, then he'd need to do everything initially in a perfect state without any tweaks in between until all of us got to perfection. Makes sense. So it's only normal that he created all of us, the whole of reality, in perfection in its final form in the first place. Okay, that's good. That's motivating. Very positive. The second state is their presence in the 6,000 years, which were divided by the two systems into a body and soul. They were given the work in Torah and Mitzvot in order to invert their will to receive and turn it into a will to bestow contentment upon their Maker, and not at all to themselves. During the time of that state, no correction will come to the bodies, only to the souls. This means that they must eliminate any of self-reception, which is considered the body, and remain with but a desire to bestow, which is the form of desire in the souls. Even the souls of the righteous will not be able to rejoice in the Garden of Eden after their demise, but only after their bodies rot in the dust. Okay, so this is the first state in creation. Let's call this 1. So, the next state he's talking about is us. Well, let's draw it a bit. There we go, here. Us in this world. Okay? This is our second state. Here he's saying, oops, what we need to do is correct ourselves. That's what he's saying, isn't it? He's saying these 2,000 years, so this is our second state. It means our state in this world, right? In corporeality. Corporeality. That's what it's talking about. So the Creator created this imperfection in the first state, here. And then he said, okay, this is great, but you need to attain it. So how are we going to attain it? He says, well, that's all we got to do is make you imperfect. Okay. So he created this imperfection in the first place and then brought us to this level of consciousness, which is absolutely opposite. And this is where we need to start building our spirituality from. Why he did that, we're going to talk about. But it's really good that he did that. And as we discover later on, we're going to understand how ingenious his plan was. So this second aspect here, the second time period that our world, corporeality, let's call it our world as well so we don't get it mixed up. The time we spend our world is for us to correct the soul. In other words, it's actually for us to attain all the levels of spirituality while we're living in this world. And let's see what the third stage is. The third state is the end of correction of the souls after the revival of the dead. At that time, the complete correction will come to the bodies too. For then they will turn reception for themselves, which is the form of the body, to take on the form of pure bestowal. And they will become worthy of receiving for themselves all the delight and pleasure and pleasantness in the thought of creation. And with all that, they will attain a strong adhesion by the force of their equivalence of form with their matter, since they will not receive all that because of their desire to receive, but because of their desire to bestow contentment upon their Maker, since he receives pleasure when they receive from him. And for purpose of brevity, from now on I will use the name of these three states, namely first state, second state, and third state, and you should remember all that is explained here in every state. So, the third state is us coming back to this level of perfection. There we go. And this is the third state. So all we have to do is, while we are in this world, so we have a dot in the heart, and we've come to study spirituality. So here we're studying how to become spiritual. And we start attaining a higher level of perception. Let's call this the barrier. This is the barrier that separates us from the spiritual world. Okay, this line here, let's make it a bit thicker. So this line separates us from spirituality. And what we need to do, according to Bala Salam's writing, is, well, we start from here, start to correct ourselves, and rise in the levels of spirituality. All we have to do is just go up the ladder. That's all. And once we get up the ladder, he's saying we will come back to perfection. And that's the third state. So the whole purpose of creation is for us to attain the perfection that the Creator created by our own efforts, by our own desire to attain it. If the Creator had given that to us, we would have been like animals. It would have been like he was throwing scraps of meat at us. And obviously that's not something we like, okay? We don't raise our children in a way that they don't understand anything in life. What we want to do is give our children everything so they understand life, so they're very smart, clever, competent, they know everything, and they can manage their lives. So the Creator wants to give us all the capacity, and he wants us to attain it by our own force. Just like we go to school and we study, we pass our exams, and we become something in life. The Creator also wants us to become something in his world. And that's the purpose of creation, to reach that perfection just like he's perfect. Two things we need to clarify here. The desire to receive is called the body, he said. We do not talk about our corporeal body in spirituality. In spirituality, our corporeal body does not exist. The body is equals desire to receive. And imagine it like a vessel I drew here. I'm actually going to get rid of this body, because that's going to confuse you. Think of it like a vessel of reception. We are a desire to receive pleasure. That's all. Don't associate it with your body. Our body has nothing to do at all with spirituality. It is just a gateway. It is just a tool for us to start to work. And the body represents the desire to receive, that it absorbs everything. Just like in the perception of reality we learned in the last lesson, all our senses are designed in such a way that it pulls everything in. We're like a black hole, really. We're just pulling everything in and feeling everything on the inside. So the Creator wants to develop us in such a way that we can get out of this box and perceive the whole of reality, what's on the outside. And on the outside, there's the Creator himself. So our pure objective is, according to what we read, is from this dot in the heart, this inclination to reach spirituality, we begin to build a soul, a desire to receive, which can reciprocate the action of bestowal to the Creator. Does that make sense? Hope it does. Okay, if it doesn't make sense, let me know. Okay, so that's in a nutshell the purpose of creation. Well, it isn't a nutshell because they're talking about it in 6 volumes of Talmud Eser Sefrot and about 26 volumes or so in the Zohar. So yeah, this is a bit of a nutshell, but any questions there, Anthony, regarding this topic?
Yes, we do have, we've got some questions here. One that came in recently from Stephen Fairley from the UK. He asks, how can we have our own force if there is none else besides him?
Well, that's very easy. There's none else besides him according to the book, but in my sensation, there's none else besides me. For me to say there's none else besides him, it means I see that the Creator is doing everything and there's nothing for me to do. If I see he's doing everything, what could I possibly do? So the Creator is completely concealed. So he gives us room to do things. This is very important for us to understand. We must always think like, if I'm not for me, who is for me? Instead of thinking there's none else besides him. There's none else besides him is more like relating to a situation which is beyond my control. We should learn to relate it to it that way. If there's something which I don't have any control over, then we can say, well, there's none else besides him. But if I feel that I can do something, for example, tonight, you felt you could come to the lesson, you felt you could watch it, you felt you could do that. See, there is none else. It's not there's none else besides him. There's none else besides me. So until we feel the Creator and his actions all the time, we can't really say there's none else besides him. It's a good question though. Rule number 1, just because it's written in the book, you don't go and blindly believe that that's how it is. Because then we'll turn this study into a religion. The last thing we want is another religion on the planet. There's already 3,800 of them. So what we want to do is we want to come to the attainment of there's none else besides him. And that's a whole different ballgame.
Okay. Next question we have. Jimmy says, sorry if I have missed this, but how do we put into reality this desire to bestow?
Well, that's the whole study, isn't it? It's like you're asking, it's like who's asking?
Jimmy.
Jimmy. Okay, yep. Jimmy, have you got kids? Let me know if you got kids. Let's say you got kids, right? And let's say he's 5 years old. He says, Dad, I want to be a scientist. He's only 5 years old, and you're thinking, well, where did you get that from? But he says, no, I want to be a scientist. He goes, okay, you want to be a scientist? Fine. First, you got to start going to primary school, and then high school, college, university, master's degree, doctorate, probably 2 or 3 of them, and then you can be a professor. And then you got to write a lot of articles, a lot of books maybe too. Come up with something the rest of the world didn't come up with if you want to be popular anyway. And that's how it is. Okay? So as you can see, it's going to take quite a long time. Well, same with us, because growing up takes time. Obviously, it's not going to take 30, 40 years, God forbid. Okay? But it's going to take some time. So what we have to do is put our backbone into studying. We have to put a bit of effort behind it. We have to start discovering how we can apply the method. We have to think about how to integrate ourselves into this mechanism called the wisdom of Kabbalah, and to study and to learn. And then, as we learn, we'll begin to have these inner sensations which will guide us through what to do, how to do throughout our lives. So the most important thing when you want to study Kabbalah is to come and study. So hopefully once the education center terms are over as well, hopefully you'll come to join one of the groups in your local areas. Hopefully there'll be one in your local area. If not, we have a virtual group, so that's also okay. And you'll carry on studying. And as you carry on studying, you'll find that inside you'll begin to go through changes. And these changes are the result of studying.
Okay. We have another one here, and this one comes from Enoch from Tanzania. Enoch's asking, what is the difference between spirit and soul?
Spirit and soul. Well, they're the degrees. They're degrees of attainment. There are actually 5 degrees. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yehida. And nefesh is the soul. Ruach is also called spirit, but it's also another name for soul as well. It comes from the word wind. Neshama also means soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama. It's just a higher level of attainment of the Creator's attribute of bestowal. There are 5 levels actually. Yeah.
Okay. Now, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. Mirjana from Zimbabwe asked earlier, when we have desire to reach upper light, we are going through the process, the way of Kabbalah. Is the level of perfection and upper light obtained in our physical body?
No, that's a very good question. Our physical body has nothing to do with our soul whatsoever. We need to attain it kind of outside of our body. Well, not kind of, it's outside of our body. It has nothing to do with our body. Think of it like this. Let's say this is my body. Okay, and this, the dot in the heart, this is a desire for spirituality. We're a desire to receive. Okay, this is a desire to receive for itself. And this is a desire to receive with an inclination for bestowal. We need to build it out of this inclination, which is going to be a higher level of consciousness. And it is not in our body. It's like having 2 bodies, let's say. One spiritual, one corporeal. Yeah.
Okay. And so Emmanuel is asking from Nigeria, in experiencing the light or... Sorry about that. Emmanuel from Nigeria is asking, in experiencing the light or spiritual energy, is there any difference while learning or reading from Kabbalistic books and electric devices? Such as like maybe the difference between a
book and an iPad.
And an iPad or something of that nature.
It's a good question. Now, a book has a spiritual root. Everything in this world has a spiritual root. These are the roots. These are the branches. What we want to know when we're reading is there's a spiritual root to a book because there's the story, the writer, and the book. So there's a thing that complements it. But what we really want to get out is not whether we're reading from a book or a digital device, but the whole idea is to read the text and to study it. In Kabbalah, it's not about the device, it's about the intention. So before the study, before doing anything, the most important thing is to understand why I'm doing something, because the root is the cause, is the why of everything. Why of everything. So here, when we're reading a book, okay, the important thing is to relate it to why I'm reading the book. So I'm guessing it's not going to make a lot of difference as long as we're studying. Yeah. But there is a route to a book. I don't know the route to an iPad or a laptop. but I know there's a root to a book, so the book is very important because the page is the white light and the black text is the desire to receive for itself, and the white and the black on top of each other are a representation of how the light and the desire to receive matches itself within the sentences. So all the letters in Hebrew and all the combination of the letters that make up the words and the sentences bring us together a shape, a form, where it's representing the desire to receive for myself and the attribute of bestowal and how they're interacting. That's the book.
Okay, and our last question here comes from Luis from the UK. It says, I watched something yesterday and that it said that the consciousness is still available within the or surrounding the body for a few minutes after death. So in those moments, I guess, is that when we choose to return back to our bodies or continue forward in the spiritual realm?
Okay, that's good questions. The body is good questions. Look, the body when it dies is irrelevant, right? I've got a shirt on me today, right? When this shirt gets old, I'm going to throw it in the bin because it's getting old. If it gets ripped, if it gets old, what am I going to do? I'm going to throw it in the bin, and from the wardrobe, I'm going to take another shirt and I'm going to wear that. Our body isn't any different. Because we don't feel any other reality beyond our body, we are, enchanted by it. We're captivated by it. We're actually captive inside our body, not captivated by it. We're captives of it. And we think there's no other existence except our body. But that's not so, because if our body, which has value as long as we use it as a gateway to attain spirituality, other than that, though, it's just like an animal. Just like, we eat a chicken. And, great. Okay. Just like we eat a chicken or meat or whatever, and we digest it and we keep this body alive. And same thing, but the life of a chicken is not really relevant in terms of our spiritual development. Our body is also, it doesn't have anything spiritual within it. If it did, it wouldn't die. The whole idea of dying as well is not a negative thing. It's a renewal. So all of the spiritual attainment that we accomplish while we're living in this world needs to be in this dot in the heart we're developing. Shmuel, to not please. Thank you. Okay, it all needs to be here. In time, this is only our third lesson. In time, we're going to learn, when we start to develop this dot in the heart, we begin to divide, while we're living here, this reality into two. Spirituality is also here, but it needs to be sensed here in this dot in the heart. As long as we don't have that sensation, we feel like we're living in this body. And if we don't develop a soul, when this body dies, we think we're dying. But if we had developed the dot in the heart, well then, this would be me, and it would be deathless. And then I can relate to this body as my shirt. All right, let's read a little bit more. We've got 20 minutes. We've got time today. So let's read a little bit more. Let's see what the Kabbalists are telling us. Now, there are a few things to know. Let's read again 118. Let's see what we got. 118, item 16, and then we're going to have to dig into some definitions. In fact, is there anything we should define here? Okay. Okay. So there we go. Our first state is when we were created. here in perfection, but we're not conscious of the perfection yet. We're just in that sensation of perfection, but we don't understand what it is. And then we lose that consciousness, and we end up in this world, our world, with our five senses, have no clue about what spirituality is. Over the centuries, humanity, we're developing egoistically, an increasing ego throughout the generations, egoistic development. And this egoistic development brought us all to despair. Despair brings us to the dot in the heart. If we're really wondering about the meaning of life, we look for it, we search. And in one of our searches, we come to spiritual study. We like to call it Kabbalah. It's a science to attain the purpose of life, the whole of creation. And once a person starts to study, he can then rise back to perfection with complete consciousness and understanding. That's our process. This is what we need to do, and there's no choice about that. This state we have to attain. No choice on that. Okay, so that's good to know. At least we know what we need to do. Let's read a little bit more. What we're going to read now, page 118, again, Introduction to the Book of Zohar, item 16. Let's see what they're writing us here. Therefore, one must not wonder at how it was that the choice had been taken from us, since we must be completed and come to the third state, since it is already present in the first. The thing is that there are two ways the Creator has set for us in the second state to bring us to the third state. So he's saying we've got no choice. We must attain spirituality because that's how he created everything in the first place. But to get to the Creator, he's saying there's two ways. Let's see what they are. One is the path of keeping Torah and mitzvot. Now, Torah and mitzvot means, obviously, we're not talking about Torah and mitzvot as in the religious Torah and the religious commandments. Torah comes from two words. One is a manual, and one is illumination. So there's Torah, illumination, and Hora, which is a manual, like a user manual. So two of them put together, it's called Torah. It means if you use the Kabbalistic text correctly, you'll get light. And light means wisdom. Okay, so it's not going to be obviously something coming out of the skies in a blinding light and give you a shock. So the mitzvot means that I correct myself. Mitzvot, although in the religious sense they use it as a commandment, as in a religious deed, but no, in spirituality, a deed means I correct my egoistic desire to receive to a bestowing factor. That's all. So let's say I had a desire to receive something egoistically for myself. In spirituality, I make a mitzvah if I turn that to bestowal. It's called a correction. Correcting myself, basically, is called a mitzvah. So don't get boggled up in the jargon. Torah, the Kabbalistic text, authentic text that we're studying. Zohar, Ari's Tree of Life, which is the 10 Sefirot, which is Baal HaSlam's writings on it. Thirdly, the articles of Baal HaSlam and Rabash. That's all. Torah means the book where you get the light from. It's actually not the name of a book. And what's the second path then? The second path is the path of suffering, since the pain itself purifies the body and will eventually compel us to invert our will to receive into the form of a will to bestow and to cleave to Him. It is as our sages said, if you repent, good, and if not, I will place over you a king such as Haman, and he will force you to repent. Our sages said about the verse, will hasten it in its time, if they are rewarded. I will hasten it, and if not, in its time. So there are two ways to attain the purpose of creation. One, we could be good kids, and study, like good kids in school study, and get good grades, so we can get good grades as well, correct ourselves, sounds good, or life can compel us by suffering. Obviously not a very nice thing to do, is it? Imagine you're having a child and he doesn't want to go to school, he doesn't want to study, but you love him or her, and what do? You put pressure on them. So listen, you have to go to school, you got to get your homework done. You sit with them, you teach them, you pressure them, you make them understand that if they don't go to school and if they don't learn things, they're just going to end up as a loser, all right, or not being able to take care of themselves. So we don't want that for our children. The Creator definitely doesn't want that for us as well. So we want to raise our children well. The Creator wants to raise us well. And so the whole idea of the path of suffering is something we need to avoid. But the path of suffering has to be there, because without suffering, we don't move forward, unfortunately. So every time I slow down, life is going to push me with a bit of suffering. He's going to pinch me and he's going to remind me and say, listen, there's a purpose to life and you're slowing down. Don't do that. Okay, that's why all the suffering comes to a person. It allows us to ask the question, why I'm suffering. So the suffering awakens in us the dot in the heart. It pushes us to look for an answer. And this is how we come to the study. Now, after that, we've got two choices. One, we can study and be good kids, or we can say, you know what, I don't want to do this. I just want to have fun. Okay? You can. So life will carry on pressuring us. Let's see what else he's talking about. This means that if we're granted through the first path, by keeping, let's call it spirituality, in our correction, we thus hasten our correction, and we do not need the harsh agony and the long time needed to experience them, so they will compel us to reform. So if we do this voluntarily, we move faster without suffering. And if not, in its time. So in its time means in the course of the duration that the Creator had planned initially. Meaning only when the suffering will complete our correction and the time of correction will be forced upon us. On the whole, the path of suffering is also the punishments of the souls in hell. Ooh. But in any case, the end of correction, the third state, is mandatory because of the first state. Our choice is only between the path of suffering and the path of light and correction. Thus we have thoroughly clarified how the three states of the souls are interconnected and necessitate one another. Okay, one more word we need to define here is obviously going to be hell. Now, the Creator, being good, is not going to fry us anywhere, so don't panic. Hell means our inner consciousness not feeling good about what we did. You know what? Sometimes you do something really bad and you feel bad about it. Well, that's kind of the sensation of hell. It's called shame in spirituality, but not the same shame that we feel in this world. It's a much higher level of understanding about what I could have done and I didn't do, and in fact I did something bad. But given our level of development and our level of study at the moment, as just an introduction, hell is not, definitely not, what you might have learned in religious teachings. Okay, God is not going to barbecue us anywhere at all.
What do you mean, no fire?
No fire. Oh. Okay, the only fire you might have if we're doing the barbecue for us.
All right, sounds good.
Right, but the Creator doesn't want to fry us. We're not going to be burning anywhere at all. That understanding of hell is when a person feels shame and bad because he could have done something good and he by choice didn't. It's also an attainment, actually. It's not, there's nothing bad in creation, because at the end of the day, that's also specific attainment, and a person can now correct that situation. So in reality, there is nothing bad. So when the books are talking about such things, don't get carried away with what you might have learned in religious teachings.
Okay.
Okay?
We've got a couple questions. You want to answer?
Yeah, go for it.
Dora has a question, and Dora says, are we going to address...
Microphone. Yeah, Dora is asking what?
Dora has asked, are we going to address reincarnation in this lesson? From my first question before.
Okay, reincarnation. There is reincarnation. In fact, I addressed it but didn't mention it. See this here? This is humanity. All right, so we have a picture here. This is humanity. From the beginning of time, humanity has been going through reincarnation. And it has been developing egoistically. And now we're at a point where a lot of people in life are wondering about the purpose of life. And we're all seeking all kinds of ways to discover it. So yeah, there is reincarnation. Reincarnation actually is the reincarnation of the desire to receive, not the body. We're not talking about physical bodies, okay? Remember, we're talking about the desire to receive. This is reincarnating. Because as it reincarnates, it understands that all these pleasures don't bring any lasting fulfillment at all. All right? Anything else there, Anthony?
Oh, yes. They're starting to come in now. We have another question from Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Tony says, if the body is so irrelevant...
Tony says,
Tony
yes.
says, if the body is so irrelevant to our spiritual growth, and he's talking about the physical body, why do we keep referring to it in our study?
Because we live in it. Okay, but we need to, when you first start, we have to start somewhere. All right? We have to start somewhere, and we're living in this body, so I can't just chuck it in the bin. But we need to start getting used to the idea that when we're talking about the body, we're talking about a desire to receive. A desire to receive pleasure for its self-fulfillment, which means in an egoistic way. That's why. But body in Kabbalah means a desire to receive. Corporeality means a desire to receive for myself. If I'm in a desire to receive for myself, I perceive this corporeal reality. Spirituality means I'm in a desire to bestow. If I'm in a desire to bestow, I discover and perceive a reality beyond this world. See, very easy definitions. Yeah?
Okay, so our next question comes from Stephen Fairley. And Stephen says, in regards to the third state, is attaining the third state the end of this world?
It's the end of correction, definitely the end of this world. In our perception of reality, we will no longer feel this world because we would have completely gotten over our desire to receive in an egoistic way and would have turned it into altruism, and that is the attribute of the Creator. So we would be there living in that existence, in that higher level of consciousness, and we wouldn't be dealing with this world at all. Amen.
Carmen from Romania is asking, the creation, is that part of the Creator?
Yes, the dot in the heart. Okay, that's a nice question. I like that. This dot in the heart, it has to be a part of the Creator, which is bestowal, and that has to be in us because it's our starting point. If we didn't have that inclination to bestow from the Creator, we'd never get out of our desire to receive. So the Creator is giving us a head start, a kickstart, let's say, with the dot in the heart by giving us a piece of Him, which is the attribute of bestow. Yes.
Alrighty, and it looks like Jimmy from England is asking, is it correct to view everything that happens to us, no matter if it's bad or good, as a chance to attain spiritual enlightenment, like learning from our mistakes in a way?
We don't know why something bad happens to us or something good happens to us. We just don't know why. We feel good or bad. So when anything happens, it's an opportunity for us to push our efforts in studying so we can come to the attainment of why things are happening to us. Otherwise, we don't know what to do with them. Let's say something, I don't know, let's say somebody hit my car today, God forbid, all right? And I don't know why that happened, but and I can't discover why that happened now. So there's nothing to worry about why it happened now. The thing that we all need to do is just to, as best we can, give effort to attain spirituality so that we can come to an understanding of how and why this reality functions in this way.
Okay. And that is our last question there from Jimmy.
Okay. So that's it.
That's it.
All right. Okay. So if you guys don't have any more questions, this was our third lesson. Now, if you do have any questions, though, write them down. Okay. So don't just keep them in your head and say, I'll save it for the next lesson. Write them down because you'll mostly forget. So we can clarify everything. In these lessons that we're doing, it's very important that you ask all the questions that you can ask so that we clarify everything very much. So I don't mind you asking. You can ask the same question a few times if it's not clear, and we'll try to settle it as best we can in the lessons.
And one last one announcement here. Katie has just written in to Jimmy, Luis, Stephen, and other friends in the UK. Says just a heads up that there's also a parallel platform for you for the UK. You might want to sign up there too if you're interested to be updated about different things, local events, and things of that nature. Okay.
Okay. So how many countries is it represented here today? Are represented?
Well, let's take a look. We have. Oh, I made a little list earlier. We have Jose from Spain, Emmanuel from Nigeria. We've got friends from Ghana, Finland, England, Malawi, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Durban, I think Durban, South Africa. We've also got Romania, the USA is here, Spain, Zimbabwe, also Ghana, and Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay, so all the friends in Africa, we've got groups for you. We got a group for you. That's good. And all the friends in Europe, we have groups as well. So, and also the US. So everybody actually is good because after the course, we can have a way to help you continue with the studying as well. So it's good. I'm glad we have a lot of people from all around the world, Europe, Africa, and the US, which is good. So we're only missing the Asia Pacific time period, but that's like way early in the morning for them, isn't it? Right. Okay, dear friends, I hope the lesson was okay. If there is anything you feel that we should improve, please write to us. We're all good for positive criticism. We'd like to get things done better. So if there's anything you think we can improve, let us know. Any questions, jot them down. We'll try to answer them in the next lesson. And our sixth lesson is going to be purely based on questions and answers. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, that's the sixth lesson should be based on just questions and answers. Or we'll dedicate some part of it if there aren't a lot of questions. But write all your questions down so we can get them all out of our system and learn all the tricks of the trade, and then we'll carry on studying deeper and deeper. These are the basic concepts we need to know for the moment. Now, next lesson will be the language of Kabbalah. So the next lesson on Wednesday, we'll talk about why the Kabbalists use a specific language to describe the spiritual worlds. And that'll be an interesting lesson as well. I think these 10 lessons that we're going to see are going to build a really good foundation. And on top of that, in the second semester, we'll have our practical workshops, practical work and how to work in the group in order to go through these spiritual states. So until then, though, you guys have a great evening. All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Bye
Have a
now.
good night.